Good afternoon. This is Rabbi Sachs coming to you from the headquarters. What do they say with Mark Levine, right, or something like that? From the deep down in the bunker. So coming to you from the Chai Center, and welcome to the Chai Center, and welcome to the Chai Academy. We have been discussing Maimonides' view of Teshuva and laws of Teshuva, philosophy of Teshuva. Of course, Teshuva means repent, return, regret, resolve, etc. And where we left off last week was Maimonides was talking about some types of attitudes and dispositions that is very, very difficult to do teshuva, right? So so we discussed last week the concept of a mean, right? And we also discussed the mean is that there's no God, for example, or there's a dualism. God is there's two gods, or God is completely physical and corporeal. And then, of course, he says that another level of people that is God frowns on is an Epicurus. And Epicurus says there's no relationship between God and man. It just doesn't exist. He says, it's ridiculous. God exists, but he is hi Elaine, hi Susan. God exists, but he is not, he doesn't have dialogue, or no, I don't believe in that dialogue, etc. Another level of where God frowns upon is somebody says the Torah is not from God, the Torah is man-made, and Moses wrote it, or the Book of J and the Book of P, and other nonsense. So says that is considered somebody who denies the Torah. Somebody denies a mitzvah, he goes on to say, even one mitzvah, he says, no, this mitzvah I don't believe in it. I believe this mitzvah is malarkey. Once again, you can always say, I'm not ready for that mitzvah yet. Or that mitzvah is confusing to me. But to say it's just malarkey, God never made it, it's nonsense, it's made up. Right? That is unacceptable. Another one, he says, if somebody causes the multitudes to sin, like Yeravam, and I believe that's where we were holding, Yeravam ben Nevat. So, who was Yeravam ben Nevat? So he was a contemporary of King Solomon's son. After King Solomon died, there was this divide. Israel was split into two: the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. The southern kingdom is where the Holy Temple was. The northern kingdom is where the 10 tribes were. So there were 2 tribes in the southern kingdom, and there were 10 tribes in the northern kingdom. And King Solomon's son, Yeracham, so he became the king. And Yeravam became the king of the northern kingdom. And it soon dawned on Yeravam that he lacks authenticity because he doesn't have a temple. So what does he do? He builds another temple in northern Israel. And in the Holy Temple, they had figures of lions, implying royalty. So this character, Yeravam, put calves, golden calves. So golden lions in one, golden calves in the other. And he placed various idols and low doors. As you came in, you had to bow to this idol. You found yourself either squatting or bowing or bending. And that is considered a sinner that causes the multitudes to sin. So that is somebody that is very, God frowns upon this person. And, Teshuva is going to be very elusive. The next one Maimonides talks about is somebody who just doesn't attach themselves to the community. The community is going through hard times, and this person, for example, there's a lot of poor people, and this person says, nah, I'm just not going to bother. I don't, right? Or the community calls upon him to help with something, and he goes, nah, I'm not gonna bother. And he just, he doesn't connect with the community. He's just kind of this lone ranger. So that is wrong. When a person's in a community, you have to be involved in the community. I think it was Rabbi Hillel who said, "Al tifrosh min hatzibur." Do not separate yourself from the congregation. So if one congregation don't work for you, go to another, or make it work. But don't just become a person that's completely not affiliated with anything Jewish, or even a Jewish charity. Just nothing. The next one is somebody who proudly commits a sin publicly. And Maimonides says it's like Yehoiakim. Yehoiakim, he was the 18th king, and the first temple was destroyed under his reign. So Joachim Jeremiah was the prophet, if you recall, the prophet Jeremiah. So he was the prophet of doom, and God said, I'm just going to destroy the temple because I can't take it anymore. Who couldn't God take? Yehoiakim. Yehoiakim was his father was a righteous man, but this guy ended up to be a louse, and he idols, etc. And when Jeremiah came to warn him, Jeremiah hired somebody to write a scroll. This is what God told me to tell you. He takes the scroll and he tears it up and he throws it in the fire. He kills righteous people. He defames God, and he does this publicly, and he does this as the king of Israel. So that is a person that basically lacks any form of embarrassment. He should be embarrassed as the king of Israel to malign God, to tear up the prophet's scroll. This guy had not 1 ounce, right? Probably, by the way, if he lived today, we would probably call him a psychopath. Then they just called him, he was just rebellious. He probably is a psychopath. I recall many years ago when Bernie Madoff was going to, it was his sentencing. And remember, he hurt a lot of people with a lot of money. And people, some people killed themselves. Some people, just had to go into isolation. He took down royalty. And he asked the judge if he could address the court. And the judge said, yeah. And he turned around, he addressed the court. He looked at people in the eye, and people, I remember then they had the experts, said he was just a psychopath. The way he said it, the way he apologized, you could tell it was just, it was, I'm apologizing because I have to, because it may benefit me, etc. But he was a narcissist. The next one is somebody who places fear, casts fear on the people other than to serve God, right? So you rules the community with a strong hand, and his intent, the intent of this person, whether it's a king, whether it's a president, or whether it's a congressman, the purpose is just for their own honor. It's not for any holy purpose. Just, maybe that's a narcissist. They don't have the good of the people in mind. They don't have the good of God in mind. They're just doing it strictly so that this individual person, can gain from it in some way, some shape or form. So he says all these above mentioned is the person is there's moral rot, and because there's moral rot, it's going to be very difficult for the person to do teshuva. However, if no matter even the person who denies God, if they do teshuva, God will accept them as if nothing happened. On the contrary, God will, embrace them because they've done teshuva. So that's why he began saying that there's no such thing as anybody lost. There is no person in this world that doesn't have a portion in the world to come. Right? Now, you can either get the long way, as we discussed, or you can get the short way. The short way of going straight to heaven when a person passes is you do teshuvah, you repent before you pass, and it's almost like you shampoo the car before you return before you return it to the leasing department, right? So you do teshuvah, and then you go straight to heaven. If you don't do teshuvah, then there's going to be some pitfalls along the way, but ultimately everybody has a portion in the world to come. I remember hearing a story of the Baal Shem Tov, is that there was this person who was either a mean or apikores or something to that effect, and he needed money, and so he devised a plan, and the plan was, I'm going to sell my afterlife, I'm going to sell my world to come, I'm going to sell it, and I'm going to make money, because I think it's malarkey, I think it's anyway. And so he did. He sold it for a meager sum, by the way, not even a lot of money. Anyway, he told his wife what he had done, and his wife looked at him in horror, and says, "Go buy it back." She goes, "It's ridiculous." She goes, "Go buy it back." So he bought it. He goes to the person he sold it to, and the person said, "I don't want to sell it back to you. I want it." So he takes him to the Baal Shem Tov. He takes him to arbitration. And the Baal Shem Tov told the fellow, "You don't have to sell it to him back. It was bought fair and square." He goes, "Yeah, but that's my world to come. I mean, he can't hold on because you sold it." The end of the story was the fellow had to pay double or triple, and this is the Baal Shem Tov's advice, because to teach him a lesson that there is such a thing as the world to come. So the bottom line is, if a person does teshuva, they get into world to come. It's like effective immediately. If a person doesn't do teshuva, they may have to come back to this world. They may have to go to purgatory, and then they will then be able to go to heaven. Before Maimonides concludes this chapter, he just says that there's a couple of other things we should be wary of. And he says, and that is that, and he says, because it comes so easily, this sin, and it just almost like it's a natural part of us. And he says that, and God's going to take heed. What is that? What is that? He says they're the ones who shame a person. Right? You shame a person. You make up a nickname for him, says Maimonides, or you shame him. And he says, and if you and this is an interesting thing. Hamiskabed bekalon chavero. It's somebody who shames somebody in order in order to step up the ladder. Like he takes pride in shaming him because he knows this is going to make him look good in the eyes of this one or that one by making fun of him. And he gets he gets something out of it. You shame a person, so you climb a ladder at that person's expense. So that, he says, is heinous. But he says, but it's so common. People trample on it with their feet because, you're a nickname. Everybody's a nickname, right? So, but he says we shouldn't call people by the nicknames. Now that gets tricky because people's nicknames are, their parents have given them the nicknames, possibly, and the parent is no issue of shaming. Right? Every teenager knows your parents can't embarrass you. So to embarrass somebody in public, by the way, is a lot worse than just in private, where you tell them off and they're embarrassed. So they may have. That's the best way to do it. But if you do it in public, he also says that is completely unacceptable. Maimonides says that there are, he says, in addition to what we said above, right? He says there are some other things that make teshuva hard, make teshuva difficult. Now, the words he uses is maspikin, right? He says that God will not grant the person, right, the opportunity to do teshuva. However, so the person won't get an awakening. Oh, I've got to do teshuva. However, if they come to that realization on their own, they can do teshuva. So it's not that ein maspikin, God doesn't allow, as many people translate the Mishnah, but rather it's as the Alter Rebbe explains it, that God doesn't give them the opportunity. He doesn't give them a way to be awoken from their slumber, their sleep. But it is possible. So he starts off, and he goes from severe to light. And he sort of repeats, but he adds stuff. He says that the four big ones are, and we discussed these. It says there's no God, denying of God, right? And I'm sorry, I read something. I'm sorry. The first one, scratch what I just said. The first one is that you cause the masses to sin, right? You have an opportunity to, right, and you cause them to sin, or you hold back the ability for them to do a mitzvah. Either one, that's still a sin. The next one is somebody who leads their fellow man astray from the path of good, right? For example, you proselytize, right? Or you become a missionary. So there, it's not multitudes, but you knock on a door and I say, yes, I would like you to believe in, you're a Jew, yes. So let me explain you Taoism or whatever it may be, right? And now that's an issue. The next one he says that this requires, I think, some discussion. Somebody sees, this is what Maimonides says, and then we'll discuss. Somebody sees that their child becoming associated with bad influences and doesn't rebuke them. So since the child is under the parent's dominion, authority, and he did not rebuke, he refrained from admonishing instead of admonishing. So then that he says that is you kind of let them. You're responsible for this. So on face value is right. A parent has to educate the child. Essentially, you have the first 15 years of the child's life for a parent to educate their child. And if a child does something wrong, if a child does something heinous, you have to, a parent must step up and stand up, right? And unlike the conventional wisdom of today, is the teacher is always right, at least in front of the kid. You want to tell the teacher's wrong, you do that to the principal, you go to the teacher, you have a meeting and say, I don't want you to say that to my kid again, etc. But to the kid, you always say, okay, the teacher must have had a reason, or the teacher absolutely right. You never say, to say the teacher's an idiot, the teacher's a fool. The damage you are causing is huge. So you're obligated to bring this child up, to get this child to be a moral, upstanding human being. Now, we find many good people, many good parents who have a child that is basically doesn't follow in the parents' footsteps. It could be morally, it could be religiously, it could be that there's 8 generations of rabbis, and the son joins Hell's Angels, and becomes a motorcycle rider, and just drives around, and tough guy, etc. Nothing that you would expect from an 8th generation rabbi, right? So that clearly is above the age of 15, 16, right? If you find that your child is not doing well in school, this is according to Jewish law, you have to do everything in your power to make it work. If not, take the child out of school and put him in a different school. A parent has to be on top of it. A parent has to really assure that their child is thriving in school. One of the worst things is boredom. You should know, worse than anything else, is if a child is not getting anything out of school, and therefore the child is bored. Either the material is not stimulating, or there's just no interest. Then you have to find some place, even a private school, to that will cater more to one's child. And they're out there, the Waldorfs and the etc. So that's the first thing. But what about a child that just completely becomes, goes off the derech, goes off the path of morality, is no longer religious, right? So it reaches a certain point. Where one must not rebuke their child. Must not. When your child is about to turn into adult, a couple of years to adulthood, etc., and definitely adulthood, you got to do everything in your power. Everything in your power to love this child, take care of this child, and instead of rebuking, right, kill them with kindness, because there's probably, in all probability, there is something that made this child snap. Right? In all probability, it's probably some type of trauma. According to one TED talk I heard by a doctor from Milan, I think he is. It sounds like he's Italian. He says that he believes that over 80% of trauma is sexual abuse. Right? And that's, and he's a doctor of trauma. Right? Not Van der Kolk, someone else, I don't remember his name. But that's what he believes. Now, it could be, it's very hard to track down the trauma. It's not always so easy, and it could be very subtle. But something happened where this child, who statistically, very smart, very nice, very sweet, and then they snapped, and all of a sudden, and we're not talking about typical teenage stuff, all of a sudden it came into this person you don't recognize. Right? Something happened. So there's only until a certain age you can start demanding your authority and the tough love. I mean, there is room for tough love, but for the most part, if you want your child, if you want to have your connection with one's child, one needs to love him. And I would take this just a step further. That if your child, for example, decides to, I'm not going to be religious, and you are religious, or your child says, I'm going to, I'm going to do this, that, and the other, right? You're too biased. It's not your place to say, no, not in my house. You're going to eat non kosher. You can't bring it into my house. What you can say is, you need to put it on a plate, because the child knows it's not kosher. The child knows that your house is kosher. So for you to say no, they know it already. If they show up to a wedding in a bikini, they know it's wrong. They know, and somewhere, somehow, they know it's wrong. So your job is to love bomb them. Right? It's a whole philosophy out there that's endorsed, by the way, by the greatest rabbis. If a child is hurting, and the child is 15, 16, you can do it younger, but younger you still have to, it's hard to navigate when to be tough. When, if your child is, 13-year-old partying all night, it's a little, you got to be more in control. But if your child is 16, 17 and partying all night, it's a different approach. So it's one needs to just love bomb, and they just criticizing is like poison. Oh, I can't believe you just ate non-kosher. I can't believe it. It's not going to help anything. It won't change anything. It's just going to make that person feel badly. And the child wants, wants something, right? And so within reason, you get it for the child. You have to spend time with them. You have to show them that you love them. And if they're dressed crazily, they're mod or whatever it may be, don't be embarrassed of them. Right? If they see that you have their back, no matter what, that is more healing than any criticism you can give them. Any. So the correct pathway, and I think it was the Baal Shem Tov. Baal Shem Tov said that only once in 50 years should a parent rebuke their child, something to that effect, right? Which is wild, but there is so much truth to that, and one should do everything in their power to show their child you love him. You leave love notes. You leave $20 in an envelope. You leave, they're looking to buy, Xbox, buy the Xbox, right? And it's a very fine line between, like coddling them, but you have to, and bring in the other siblings, by the way. Tell the other siblings what you're trying to do is that obviously this child is hurting, and you're trying to remove the pain as much as possible. And when you spend time, you'll find that child, their angst, their the craw that's stuck in their throat, the ulcer that they have from whatever, will soothe them primarily by parents' love. So Maimonides is right. You have to rebuke, but after a certain age, one should really think long and hard. Do you want to rebuke this child, or do you want to love this child? And I would never, me personally, I would never allow God Judaism to come into to become a barrier between me and my child. So that doesn't mean that I'm eating not kosher. No, I'm me. But if God forbid my child wants to eat non-kosher, I wouldn't throw him out of the house. Right? If my child wants to do X, Y, and Z, on Shabbat, right? I won't do it. But I won't condemn them or criticize them, because I don't want God to become in the middle, and all of a sudden I'm fighting around God with my very own child. So I won't compromise my values, but I would be, at any time, any given moment, I would completely love my child, even if they don't live up to my expectations. It's a little twisted, but it's what they say in Hebrew, badika menusa. It's tried, tested, and it's proven. Love from a parent can heal so much damage, so much trauma that this child got. So always err on the side of caution. Always err on the side of love. Rosh Hashanah is coming in a few days. Don't forget Teshuva, Tefillah, Tzedakah. Don't forget to repent, resolve, etc. Extra prayers and also extra charity. And then when you go into Rosh Hashanah, you can go in with the confidence that this year is going to be way better than last year. God bless. And you can, if you need to, you can comment here or rabbi@thechaicenter.com, and I will do my best to respond if you have a question. If you'd like to see this or any other of our many discussions, then you can go onto thechaicenter.com/academy. thechaicenter.com/academy. God bless.